I watched the trailer earlier, and one of the things that hit me right away was at the very end when that title comes up. It's like, I want the soundtrack album.
Oh, yeah.
So go ahead, Mary, tell us your story.
Well, it sort of comes on gradually, the realization that your film is missing, you know. And I'm sure you felt the same. At first I thought, how come Shot Andy Warhol isn't on TV anymore? You never hear about him. He used to show on TV. And then, you know, just looking on Amazon, realizing it's only available on DVD. And how come? And then someone wanted to show it at Film Forum, and they said, you know, we're trying to show it, we can't figure out who owns it. I was like, and then again, you know, someone from Rotterdam wanted to, and said, and we can't find a print. So then it became like, I have to do something. I talked to, the film was originally produced by Christine Vachon, Killer Films, but she didn't know who had the rights either. Just a little sidebar is, you know, one of the things that made this period so great for making movies was that there were all these little companies. You know, it's one of those exciting times where, you know, suddenly everything's broken apart, and it's this happened like in music after punk, or in the early days of hip hop, when there's like a lot of little record companies. Well, in this case, there were a lot of little distribution companies. And the problem, which is very exciting, because they would take a chance on first-time directors like me. But of course, all these little companies, most of them either go bankrupt, or they get swallowed up by a conglomerate. And then that's where all the mystery starts. So in the case of Shot Andy Warhol, it was financed and released by a company called American Playhouse, who mainly did TV drama, but for a short time did movies. And they were owned by as I didn't even know at the time, it turned out they were owned by the PBS station WGBH. Anyway, American Playhouse goes out of business, so it just shuts its doors. They sell the rights to Samuel Goldwyn, who, before the movie even comes out, goes out of business, and they sell it to Orion, which released the film and then go out of business right afterwards. And so that was where, you know, sort of the trail stopped. And finally, and I enlisted Sue Bodine, who's been my lawyer forever since that movie, and we started a process, and then, you know, my manager's office, we, you know, really devoted a lot of time to tracking down who owned it and where it was. And it turned out that finally, and it took like several years to find out what should have been very simple. And I did not keep all the paperwork. You know, I was just so naive and so happy. This is the other problem, you know, so happy to get a film made. And like, I didn't think like, at that point, like a producer. I've learned a lot since. But anyway, we find out that the ownership has, the films of Orion have gone to MGM. So at first we thought we were dealing with MGM, but the actual ownership had reverted to WGBH. And they're wonderful people at WGBH, but it's a bit like the civil service. It's a, you know, public radio, and they do not move fast. And finally, see, the big problem was that we had to deal with the music licenses. And at this point, and one of the reasons why I've been embarked on this search was that, again, Criterion had reached out to me and said, we want to show this movie and make it part of the collection. So then I had a real incentive to try and sort this out. So Sue and I have spent years, really, how many years? Like 3 or 4 years calling, and eventually, and then there was the pandemic. And before that, we found that nobody had those music licenses. Killer Films didn't have them. The music supervisor, was a very famous music supervisor, Randy Poster, didn't have it. We couldn't find them. And it turned out in the end that this woman who was actually very nice and helpful, said, I think they're in boxes, like boxes in our basement, but it's the pandemic and we can't go in and nobody's allowed into the office. So that sort of shut everything down. And then over sort of the last 18 months or so, gradually they said, yes, we found these. And I think almost, and I'm gonna let Sue take over, you know, the rest of the story, but I was showing Valleyland at Toronto Film Festival, and they reached out and said, you know, we'd really like to show your first movie. It's like, this is a chance. It hasn't been seen like probably in 15 years in a theater. And then, you know, I will let Sue tell you how we managed to do this, because when we didn't have all the music licenses. And just the last thing I want to say is that I think for both Mira and I, you know, our films were made, and I think both our films are more relevant now than they were when they started. You know, yours about race and mine about feminism, because when I made Shot Andy Warhol, you know, people didn't want to say I'm a feminist, and this is about a very controversial, radical, brilliant, but also mentally ill feminist, but who still had a lot of important things to say. And like recently I was just interviewed by a French documentary team about Valerie Solanas. Her Scum Manifesto is still very much in print and online. And I feel like the things that film, and also there's the character who's transgender, in the middle of transitioning, Candy Darling, who's a sort of iconic member of the Warhol factory. All those, I feel like the film has more to say now. And there's also the actors. It was the first big film role for Jared Harris. I think he's one of the great actors of our time. First film for Justin Theroux. He's in a small part. He didn't even get top billing. He's just like in the credits, but he has actually a substantial part. And I think the best part Lily Taylor ever had, one of the great actresses. Oh, Michael Imperioli, yeah, as you saw on screen. He was a stage actor long before The Sopranos. So I just feel again, and one thing that breaks my heart is even seeing this trailer and knowing that the only things available are in very bad resolution on YouTube. You can watch the film, but in a really bad version, is that Ellen Kuras, who is a great cinematographer, it's such a, you know, she did such a beautiful looking film. And I really, we will not rest until we get it to be shown again.